Next, we'll turn the time over. These are informational items under number 6. We'll start off with Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, and good morning, board members. Deputy Superintendent of Operations Scott Jones. I declare that the Utah State Board of Education is able to meet all of its financial responsibilities with known obligations and commitments. We continue to control and manage our funds in the most effective way possible, and we're looking forward to. We're more than halfway through the year, so we're setting conditions for not only setting budgets next year, but also our year-end close activities that'll be right upon us right after we conclude the legislative session. With that, Chair, we can pull up the backups, but subject to any questions or concerns by you or any of the board members for the monthly budget report.
Okay, any questions, concerns, comments on the monthly budget report? I am not seeing any hands raised. Deputy Superintendent Jones, please move to the discretionary funds report. The discretionary funds report, there are no changes since my last update. It is in the backups for your review, board members, and is also a public facing document. I will just say or notify you that the plan is staff have a proposal for the use of a portion of the discretionary funds that we'll take to the Finance Committee during your March meeting, during the Finance Committee's March meeting. Subject to any questions or concerns with the discretionary funds report, that concludes both the monthly budget report and the discretionary funds report, Chair Huntsman. Any questions or comments from board members on the discretionary funds report? I'm not seeing any hands raised. So thank you, Deputy Superintendent Jones.
Yes, sir.
Next, we will go to the 6.3. This is information on our federal COVID-19 relief funding update. We have both Sarahs. We have Sarah Harward, our care specialist, and then also Chief of Staff Sarah Young. We'll turn the time over to you to present the information.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Can I please have screen sharing ability?
Go ahead and give that a try, Sarah.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. All right, thank you, Chair. Sarah Harward, CARES Educational Specialist. Thank you for the opportunity to present today with an overview of the current state of our COVID-19 relief funding and our K-12 education. As a friendly reminder, COVID relief funding in Utah refers to multiple awards that we have received from both the federal and state legislature, which have been made available to our K-12 local education agencies through our office administration to address needs in response to COVID-19. As we present the updates to you each month, we address them in terms of oldest to most recent award so that you have a sense of where we are as a state in terms of reimbursing these funds to our LEAs to support them in their projects and needs. And just to give you a friendly highlight, 100% of our Utah K-12 COVID-19 relief funds have been obligated as of this date. And then each month we share this chart, which demonstrates the comprehensive nature of each of the awards and the specific purposes and guidelines around each award and how much has been distributed to the field. We call your attention to the bottom of the chart where we see total and direct awards to our LEAs being over $914 million. And we are currently managing 1,142 awards to our LEAs through our Utah Grants Management System. We remind the board that these are reimbursement grants. LEAs must put together a plan, submit it to the agency review to ensure that they meet federal requirements. Once the plans are approved, the LEAs submit documentation in support of their expenditures, which is also reviewed by the agency, all before the funds are released to the LEA. So to start us off with round one, this is our Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, which is our ESSER 1 and GEAR 1 funds, which must be spent by September 30th of 2022, so later this year.
Sarah, before we
maybe it might be best before you get to the end. We've got a couple of hands raised, and you might be jumping back a slide or two.
Okay.
Can we?
Yeah. Welcome to take any questions.
If that would be good, okay with you.
Yeah, definitely.
I've got two board members. Board member Cannon, your hand is raised. That we're not getting. It's either muted. Let's go to member Lear.
My question is one, thank you, Chair. My question is one that maybe will come up a few minutes later. Maybe I was a little quick. Anyway, but we always see these big amounts that are coming to LEAs and then a very optimistic picture of how that the money's being spent and reimbursed. And I just wanted a public assurance from you that you feel like LEAs are really finding purposeful uses for this. And that may sound rhetorical, but I just, I think that's such an important thing for the public to know and the policymakers to know, that if you feel like looking at these programs and expenditures one by one, if they're meaningful and appropriate.
So either Sarah Harward or Chief of Staff Young, would you respond to the question?
Yeah, happy to answer that question. Thank you, Board Member Lear. So yes, definitely, as we are going through each of the applications and then each of the reimbursements, our LEAs are definitely really putting a lot of thought into where the most needs are. I will show a chart later in the presentation that goes through all three ESSER funds and how our LEAs have chosen to spend those, but those are just, overview categories. But I can definitely attest that our LEAs, they're being creative, they're being smart, they're being efficient in the ideas that they have as far as how they're really mitigating all the effects that are happening for our students due to the pandemic. So I can just attest that they are doing really well at the projects that they're putting forth and how they're spending their money. They're really thoughtful. I get multiple questions each day on what if we did this or what if we did that, and they're really good questions. There's a lot of thought that goes into it. I don't know if Sarah Young has anything to add or.
Thanks. And a quick follow-up, Chair.
Yes, follow up, Member Lear.
And also, Sarah, you're finding that there's always adequate documentation. You feel good about that, and if you have to go back a second time, they're always cooperative, and that warms my heart. Thank you so much for your hard work and your efficiency, but also that the LEAs are benefiting and so are our children. Thank you.
Okay, let me see if we can get Member Cannon on. You were froze on my screen, but now you're not.
Okay, I wasn't frozen on my screen, but you were. So hopefully we're both unfrozen. Many are cold, but few are frozen.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I note that Sarah told us that these are all federal funds, and federal funds work on the basis of reimbursement. So we are now dealing with $914 million of reimbursable funds. And I'm just wondering, how difficult is that for our LEAs to come up with that type of money to expend before getting reimbursed? Can you just give me a word about, what it is like for our LEAs to have to work with this funding on a reimbursable basis?
Sarah Harward, will you respond to the question?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So it is a big ask, but at the beginning of these funds, they were deemed high risk, which means that we are doing it reimbursement style. So, we do work with our LEAs, and we are very, we want to help them as much as possible. We don't want to put any burdens on them, but we do want to ensure that these funds are being spent accurately and within the federal allowable use cases. So it is trickier for some of our smaller LEAs who maybe don't have as many in the office and helping with these, but we do work with them. Sarah Young might have more to add on that.
Chief of Staff Young.
Thank you, Chair Huntsman. Just to add on what Sarah Harward was saying, I would note, Board Member Cannon, that all of our LEAs can submit reimbursements as often as they'd like. And so from that perspective, they're not necessarily stuck in kind of a cash flow situation where the agency only provides funding like once a year or twice a year. So that really creates the flexibility for them to be able to spend the funds and seek reimbursement and receive that back in their monthly allotment quickly. The last piece I wanted to add is that our staff prioritizes reviewing and processing the reimbursements over almost every other CARES task there is, noting that that's a key to continuing to support the field.
Do you have a follow-up, Member Cannon?
That's helpful. I'd like to ask maybe a different question, because you started out by saying 100% of Utah K-12 COVID-19 relief funds are obligated. So does that mean we've got ESSER 1, ESSER 2, GEAR 1, GEAR 2, American Rescue Plan, on and on? So does that mean all of those together are obligated, or will you just give me some explanation on exactly what that statement means?
Yeah, happy to do that, Chair. Is that okay?
Yes, Sarah Harwood.
Thank you, Board Member Cannon. Yeah, it's tricky sometimes with all these different terms that we have. So obligated means every bit of money that we have received has a place to go. It's either been given directly to our LEAs, or like in December board meeting when we went through all the different projects that the board proposed, all the funds have a place to go. So that's what obligated means. It doesn't necessarily mean it's been 100% reimbursed or 100% spent. It just means that it has been obligated to or given out to each of our LEAs or those projects.
And that's for all of the COVID-19 things, the ARP and all of it?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate the clarification. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Member Hutchings? You're muted. There you go.
There we go. Thanks. I just wanted to just very quickly reassure Member Lear and Cannon, great questions, and also reassure the public, as my day job has been to submit applications for these funds and then also await reimbursement, that one, USBE has provided a tremendous amount of support in helping us understand the requirements and how to provide services that are helpful to our students and also in line with what the federal requirements are. I hear among my peers when plans are sent back with some guidance on how to improve them and making sure that they're compliant. And I respect and appreciate that. It's also done very quickly and very clearly. And in light of my experience with reimbursements, just as Sarah was saying, we can send in reimbursements very often. They're reimbursed quickly. And as a leader of a very small LEA, it has been a great process, and we've been able to keep going even as a reimbursement program.
Thank you. And it also, if I just might throw this out there, we have a awesome grants management system that we didn't have in place in the past. And people often ask, how do you do this and administer the funds? And when you have a good system in place and process and internal priorities, this work can get done. And that's how it is getting done. Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands raised. Please continue.
Thank you, Chair. All right, so our round one, this is our CARES and our CRF funds, our ESSER 1, our GEAR 1, which must be spent by later this year, September 30th. So just to go over where we are as far as reimbursements, this data was pulled on January 26th, which is when these slides were due for backup. So as far as our ESSER 1 90% award, 97% has been reimbursed to our LEAs. So 97% of that money is with our LEAs, which is great. And as far as our ESSER 1 base, we're at 89.5%, and then our GEAR 1 at 73%. And then you'll just see on the bottom, we highlight how many of our LEAs have requested their full award. So 104 as far as our 90%, and 39 for the base, and 58 of our LEAs for Gear 1. Round 2, this is our Coronavirus Relief Response Supplemental Appropriations Act. This is where our ESSER 2 and Gear 2 are at, and these funds must be spent by September 30th of 2023. So just to give you some key points for ESSER 2, this was awarded to our LEAs in April of 2021. Again, over 90% of that award distributed directly to our LEAs. And as we look through the plans, most of our LEAs chose to spend their funds on addressing accelerated learning for students, purchasing educational technology, and implementing summer learning and supplemental after-school activities. And we will just note that LEAs must spend ESSER 1 before they can request their ESSER 2 funds. And this is just to ensure that we aren't returning any funds unnecessarily to the federal government at the end of the grant period, so that all our LEAs can get the full support that they need in response to COVID-19. Here is our reimbursement chart for ESSER 2. So because of that, that they must spend ESSER 1 before ESSER 2, that's why we see reimbursement levels a little bit lower than ESSER 1, but we are at 29% reimbursement for the 90% award, 25% reimbursement for the 10% base, and Gear 2, which is newer. It was awarded in November of 2021, so that's why we see it at just a 1.7% reimbursement rate. But we will note that LEAs are starting to reimburse for that award. And then at the bottom, again, the number of how many LEAs have requested their full award. So additional federal awards from the CRRSA Act. So we have our Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund, our Gear 2, where we have $11.8 million distributed to our LEAs to serve special education and at-risk students. And then at the direction of the governor's office, $1.3 million was given to the University of Utah Reading Clinic. And then EANS, our Emergency Assistance for Non-Public Schools, where USB assumed responsibility for equitable services, as opposed to that going through the LEAs, which was traditionally done with the previous federal awards. We are working with 22 schools that received an award to support them in their reimbursement requests, and the state does provide them with professional services related to professional learning for teachers, for online and distance learning, and tutoring services as allowed by this program. And then we did want to highlight from ESSER 2, one of the projects that was approved in December of 2021. I know Superintendent Dixon already highlighted this, but I did pull, this was a screenshot of our state dashboard on January 26th. So, and we do know that Superintendent Dixon highlighted that the full $12 million has been funded to eligible projects. And I will just highlight that every district had at least one project funded. And we had a total of 12,827 projects and 1,018 schools served. So a great project. We know that it was a great thing for our teachers to be able to get their classroom supplies and equipment to help them in response to COVID-19. And I did provide the link on this slide. We encourage you to follow it. It goes to our Utah dashboard, where you can view each of the projects that were funded for our teachers. And we appreciate all those who had a hand in this project.
I do have a couple hands raised,
Yes.
and I didn't catch which one went first, but we'll go with Member Earl.
Yes, my question is around the donors choose. Did districts decide, or did teachers decide what these, what the usage was of these funds? I'm just curious, because when we say that this many schools was served and their projects, did the districts decide the projects for the teachers, or what was your experience with this?
Sarah Harwood, do you want to speak to it?
I can definitely. Sarah Young really did a lot of the project lead on this, so she might have some to add as well. But this was submitted by the teachers. So it went from the teacher got to submit their project, and then it went through an approval process through the Utah or through the Donors Choose program. So Sarah Young has more to add on that.
Okay. Chief of Staff Young.
Thank you, Chair Huntsman. The one thing I'd add to that, Board Member Earl, is that when a teacher submits, every single project also sends an automatic email to their principal so that there's transparency in terms of their requests and aligning with the needs of the students in the school community.
you have a follow-up, Member Earl? You're muted.
I don't know. I've hit it like 3 times. So, and maybe it was just the way it was phrased that it sounded like district projects were accomplished through this. I was just wanting to make sure because the intent was to get it to the teachers, and it sounds like that's exactly what happened. So thank you for giving me that additional information.
All right, Member Booth, I don't see your hand raised. Maybe your question was answered. Is your hand raised?
To applaud both Sarahs. This report month by month is one of the highlights, and it just makes me sleep well at night knowing that these amazingly huge amounts of resources are being carefully dealt with, and especially what could be not only a blessing but a burden on local LEAs is being finessed in such a way by both Sarahs and their team that it really is a blessing. I just want to thank them. Thank you.
And Member Moss?
Just a very quick follow-up to that. I'm not going to miss much, if anything, about COVID, but these reports are one of the few things I will miss. It's been very efficient, comprehensive, allows us to really have visibility on what's going on. So I just join Member Booth in saying thanks for the way you've kept us on top of all this.
Okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised. Do you have more to add, Sarah Harward?
I do not, but thank you. I appreciate it.
Chief of Staff Young? Okay, thank you. And it's quite a team approach to get this done. And so I echo the appreciation, so thank you. At a few requests here, board members, it is, here, look at the clock on here, 10:39, but almost 10:40. We're going to take a 15-minute break, and at 5 minutes to 11, we're going to get right back into this. So,
Chair Huntsman, I do apologize. When you said you had more to add, I thought you meant on this. I do have a couple more slides.
that's what I was thinking, but
I'm so sorry.
you know what? We're the only thing standing between the slides and the break is going to be you. So
I know. I apologize. I'll go through them as quickly as
no,
possible.
you're fine. Okay, hold off. We're not going to do that break yet. So
Okay.
Please continue, Sarah Harward.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry about that, everyone. All right. So round 3, our American Rescue Plan Act. This is our ARP-ESSER and our EANS-2, which must be spent by September 30th of 2024. So we received $615 million in total awards for Utah K through 12 for our ARP-ESSER. Again, 90% of that was distributed directly to our LEAs. And then as far as the state reserve, we did have some federal guidance on how that remaining 9.5% could be spent. So 5% of the total award was set aside for accelerated learning, and 1% for evidence-based summer enrichment programs, and then 1% for evidence-based comprehensive after-school programs. And for those two, those were awarded to the community in a competitive grant, and the board approved the initial awards in alignment with the available funds in the October 2021 board meeting. All right. So just to give you a highlight of our ARP-ESSER plan, so one of the federal requirements for this award is that at least 20% of an LEA's total award must be spent on accelerated learning. As we were going through the plans, we see an average of 36% being spent on accelerated learning, which is above that federal requirement. And we know this is speaks to the need at the local level, where leaders have chosen to put resources to meet the needs of students, teachers, and families. Additional priorities that we saw LEAs choosing to spend their funds was on purchasing educational technology, capital improvements, including HVAC, and then those mental health services for students and community. Here is our reimbursement chart This is the newest of the ESSER awards, so we do see this at the smallest amount being reimbursed, but we have started to see LEAs requesting reimbursements. And again, at the bottom, the number of LEAs that have requested their total award. Additional federal funds from the ARP Act is our ARP-EANS, our Emergency for Assistance for Non-Public Schools. Again, USBE is serving as the fiscal agent for the award. And then there is an additional eligibility requirement for EANS 2 as opposed to EANS 1. And it is that non-public schools must meet or exceed 24% of total students in the school from households with a low socioeconomic status. And then an additional change for EANS 2 is that USBE may not use ARP funds to reimburse any non-public school. And then just to give you an overview highlight, this is all 3 ESSER awards. All 90% has gone directly to our LEAs. 9.5% of that state reserve has been additional funds to our LEAs or resources, and then 0.5% for the state administration fund. Here is this chart I was talking about. This is all 3 ESSER awards in one chart. And so this is where we see the number of LEAs that chose to spend some of their funds in the federal allowable use case categories, which are down the left. So LEAs were allowed to spend in more than one category, and this is all 3 awards. So that's why you see a high number of LEAs that are spending in this category. So the top 3 categories for all 3 ESSER funds are educational technology, addressing pandemic effects on student learning, which is that accelerated learning to mitigate learning loss, and then cleaning supplies and services. So this just gives you an idea of where all the funds have gone in order. And then finally, our state transparency dashboard. So this is available on our public website. You see the link there, and it gives an overview of our K-12 COVID-19 relief funding. It was updated January 25th of this year and goes over each of the awards for every LEA, as well as their reimbursement status for each of the federal relief funds. And then with that, any questions?
Yes, we have a couple. Member Cannon.
Thank you. As Sarah, as I was going through the slides in preparation, on page 17, you talked about the state reserve. Will you just remind me exactly what the state reserve is?
Yeah, sorry.
Yes.
Chair, can I answer?
Sarah.
Okay, thank you. So the state reserve, so this is 10% set aside. We know 90% had to go directly to our LEAs, so that other 10% is set aside for states to be able to give additional resources and additional funding. This is where that 10% base that we gave to our LEAs in each of the ESSER awards, it comes from the state reserve because the 90% is based off that Title I distribution. So some of our LEAs wouldn't have received an award otherwise. So we use a portion of the state reserve to give LEAs additional funding. And then the state reserve is also where, like in December, those projects that the board approved, that's where the state reserve is as well. So it's just an opportunity for the state to give additional funds and resources to LEAs. And Sarah Young might have more to add.
Yeah, Chief of Staff Young.
Thank you. And just to add on to that, Board Member Cannon, I would note that all of the state reserve dollars have been committed based on board actions in December. So again, that was where all of the projects that were finally decided on were funded from in terms of the comprehensive state support that is meant to then support the local response as well.
May I follow up?
Yes, follow up.
I believe that the federal government is usually pretty good about putting aside some money to administer their programs. And it looks like in Utah, instead of using all that money for administration, is using 0.5% for administration and distributing the rest. Would that be accurate, Sarah?
So, Chair, if I may.
Yeah, if you could.
So we're actually using less than 0.5% for administrative needs. And so that is where the individual salaries for Sarah Harward, as well as our administrative secretary, Jessica Kerr, will come from. And noting that we run a lean, tight team here in Utah, we are actually using less than half of that percentage that's allowable at the federal level to be able to support these programs.
I think that's commendable. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Member Earl?
Yeah, sorry, this is back in the last section when it talked about the governor setting aside, and I'm thinking it's like 11 million or something for special education funding. What was that exactly to serve special education at-risk students? And maybe we've talked about this, I'm sorry. What are the specifics on this?
Chair, if I may.
Yes, please.
Great. So the governor's emergency education relief is actually both for Gear 1 and Gear 2, an award that is made to the governor's office that is available for their discretion to provide support for COVID-19 response in K through 16. In both cases, for Gear 1 and for Gear 2, the governor's office chose to dedicate that entire amount to our K-12 LEAs. And in the first round, it was very specific to providing supplemental services at the LEA level to be able to address COVID-19 related needs for students in special education and students at risk of academic failure. That direction is provided from the governor's office. And then we at USBE are the administrative arm specific to that grant. In the second award, Gear 2, which you see here on the screen, the governor's office chose to distribute the money, again, specific to the population served for special education and at risk. However, in the second round, the governor's office did allow the LEAs to use the funding to serve all COVID-19 needs in their comprehensive community. So that is the kind of lens through which GEAR is being operated, all at the direction of our governor's office.
Okay, and those would be things like technology, additional tutors. Am I right on that? Okay. So I was just wondering, because I'm like, okay, this is something I'm not really the specifics of, not sure on. So, okay, thank you.
Okay. Member Klein?
Sorry, I don't have a question anymore. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Member Lear?
Very quickly, is there a plan already that you're working on to assess how what the benefits of this money have been in LEAs? Will you be able to do that?
Chair, if I may?
Yes, please, Sarah Young.
So we actually have quite a team from our financial operations side of the house working with the CARES program experts in terms of developing an LEA reporting tool that's in alignment with the federal reporting requirements, which I'll be really transparent, are pretty detailed in terms of what they're looking for. So once we collect that data, which we would expect to have by the close of the fiscal year, we'll have a lot more information for you as the board in terms of not only how the money was being used, but then the perceived outcomes at the LEA level and whether or not we can, tie some of those pieces together to create a more, I guess, detailed picture beyond just reimbursement of the funds.
Quick follow-up, Chair.
Yes, please.
A comment. This is a wonderful, huge silver lining. As I think Member Moss said earlier, infusion of money to LEAs. I would love to demonstrate that it's had a great effect on children and communities. I really hope we will make a lot of how this helped, and so we can prove that a great infusion of money makes a difference in educating kids. Thank you.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands raised. Thank you, Sarah and Sarah. Member Lear, your hand's still up, but I think, oh, there it went. Okay. Let's meet back at, I'll make sure you get a full 15 minutes here. Let's plan on being back at 11. And we'll dive back in our meeting. Appreciate all your work, and we'll just go and pause and have a quick break here.